1970s was a wild and untamed golden era for music, where creativity flowed as freely as the temptations lurking backstage. There was an electricity in the air, a sense that these artists were untouchable, immortal gods living lives most of us could barely comprehend. But the deities of rock, soul, and folk often carried an incredibly heavy burden in absolute silence. Studio tapes and vocal booths captured not only their raw brilliance, but in a few chilling cases, the very last echoes of their voices right before the unthinkable happened. Today, we are opening the vaults of music history to explore the 10 haunting final recordings from 1970s, legends, moments before tragedy struck. If you were fascinated by the untold stories and the dark mysteries the industry tries to hide, make sure to hit subscribe and like the video right now because you won't want to miss what we've uncovered. Number 10. Mercedes-Benz, Janis Joplin. At the beginning of October 1970, the voice that defined an entire generation was in a Los Angeles studio, putting the final touches on the album Pearl. Janis had always been an absolute force of nature on stage, but behind closed doors, the whispers of her profound loneliness were impossible to ignore. On the 1st of October, she recorded a playful a cappella track, simply stomping her foot and tapping the microphone stand to keep the beat. It was Mercedes-Benz, a light-hearted, satirical song recorded in just a single take. The tape caught her final words ever spoken in a recording booth. A joyful, raspy laugh, followed by her declaring, "That's it." Just 3 days later, silence fell. When Janis failed to show up for her next session, her band's road manager went to her hotel and discovered that she had succumbed to the heavy demons she was trying so hard to fight. It has long been speculated that she was handed a mysteriously lethal batch of street substances that night, a theory heavily fueled by the fact that several other clients from the exact same supplier met identical fates that very same week. That final laugh, caught on tape, now plays like a ghostly echo of a woman who was at her creative peak, moments before the curtain was violently pulled down forever. But warning signs don't always come wrapped in irony. Sometimes they are painfully literal. Number 9, I Got a Name, Jim Croce. I've got a name. Jim was the ultimate everyman storyteller, a blue-collar guy with a mustache and a guitar, who finally broke into massive stardom in 1973 after years of grueling struggle. His newest song, I Got a Name, had just been tracked and carried a deeply poetic message about moving forward, carrying your legacy, and leaving a mark on the world. While relentlessly touring in the fall of that year, Jim was utterly exhausted. The crushing weight of sudden fame was tearing him away from his family, and heavy rumors suggest he was secretly planning to walk away from the music industry entirely. He even mailed a letter to his wife, detailing his desperate desire to quit the road, focus on writing short stories, and just be a present father. That letter arrived far sooner than it should have. On the night of September 20th, 1973, right after finishing an exuberant show in Louisiana, Jim and his crew boarded a small chartered plane to get a head start on the next town. The aircraft inexplicably failed to gain enough altitude on takeoff and crashed violently into a tree at the end of the runway, instantly silencing one of the purest voices of the decade. The song was released posthumously and became a massive hit. Its lyrics about carrying a name through life, becoming an achingly perfect tribute to a man who was on his way home, but never quite made it. And what happens when the music isn't a love letter to life, but a direct stare into the suffocating darkness. Number 8, Black-Eyed Dog, Nick Drake. A black-eyed dog, he called at my door. Long before the world widely recognized his brooding genius, Nick Drake was a reclusive British folk musician dealing with severe, crippling depression in the early 70s. His albums simply weren't selling, Live performances terrified him to his core, and he had retreated to his parents' rural home, shutting out almost everyone he knew. In 1974, he briefly convinced his loyal sound engineer to let him record a few final tracks. What emerged from those late-night sessions was profoundly disturbing. The song Black-Eyed Dog featured frantic, aggressive guitar work and breathless, strained vocals, with lyrics directly referencing the English folklore figure of the black dog, a traditional and ominous symbol of deep depression and approaching death. He sang about running out of time, his voice practically cracking under the invisible weight pressing down on his shoulders. The handful of people in the studio noted that he looked completely hollowed out, as if his spirit had already vacated his body. Months later, on a freezing November morning, Nick's mother found him lifeless in his childhood bed. The official narrative was that he took a fatal dose of his prescribed antidepressant medication, but furious debate continues to this day over whether it was a deeply intentional exit or a tragic miscalculation by a young man desperate for a single night of sleep. The final sessions remain a raw, unfiltered portrait of a fractured mind, standing right on the edge of the abyss. Shadows also lurked where the spotlight shone the absolute brightest. Number 7. Celebrate Summer, Mark Bolan. Mark Bolan, the dazzling frontman of T-Rex, was the glittering, fabulous face of glam rock. He seemed to have the entire world bowing at his platform-shoed feet, but there was a chilling rumor that trailed him for years. Bolan was paralyzed by a phobia of cars, and repeatedly told his closest friends that he felt certain he wouldn't live to see his 30th birthday. In August 1977, he recorded and performed his final song, Celebrate Summer, a vibrant, upbeat track that ironically included the optimistic lyrical phrase, "Summer is heaven in 77. At the tail end of that summer, just 2 short weeks away from his dreaded 30th birthday, Bolan's grim prophecy collided brutally with reality. Returning home from a swanky London club in the early morning hours, the purple Mini, driven by his girlfriend, in which he was sitting in the passenger seat, veered off the road and violently struck a tree. Bolan departed the world instantly, the dark irony of a bright pop anthem like Celebrate Summer serving as his swan song added a remarkably eerie layer to a legendary figure who had predicted his own abrupt exit almost perfectly. Others tried desperately to hide their fractures from the public, fighting quiet battles inside closely guarded studios. Number 6, You Were Meant for Me, Donny Hathaway. Possessing one of the most revered and velvety soul voices in recorded history, Hathaway frequently collaborated with the great Roberta Flack, pressing pure magic into vinyl. But by the late 1970s, his mental health was rapidly and terrifyingly deteriorating. He suffered from severe mental episodes that he fought hard to keep behind closed doors, reportedly convinced that dark, unseen forces trying to steal his voice and actively monitoring his every move. In January 1979, he was back in the studio with Flack to record the gorgeous duet, You Were Meant for Me. Those present during the sessions whispered that the atmosphere was unbelievably tense, with Donny experiencing extreme erratic highs and lows, often seeming completely detached from reality, even as he managed to deliver flawless vocal takes. That very night, after abruptly leaving the studio session, he returned to his high-rise hotel room in New York City. Hours later, he was discovered on the sidewalk far below. The door to his room had been locked from the inside, and the glass had been carefully removed from the window. There was no note, no final warning, just the sudden, deafening silence of a tortured genius whose beautiful final vocals were still literally vibrating on the studio tape reels just a few blocks away. New York City provided the backdrop for even more chaotic endings that same year, where raw fury fully replaced melancholy. Number 5, My Way, Sid Vicious. The infamous bass player for the Sex Pistols was the ultimate poster child for the punk rock movement. destructive, impossibly loud, and completely spinning out of control. The end of the decade saw Sid caught in a rapidly accelerating downward spiral in the United States, deeply bogged down in the heavily publicized Chelsea hotel incident that led to the tragic death of his girlfriend, Nancy Spungen. Just before his life completely imploded under the weight of severe criminal charges, he recorded a visceral, sneering, and utterly disrespectful cover of the classic Frank Sinatra anthem, My Way. The cover was captured on film, showing Vicious snarling the famous lines and allegedly firing into the audience in a performance that bordered on pure theatrical villainy. It was a massive middle finger to the establishment, sung by a young man who was rapidly running out of time. In February 1979, shortly after being released on bail and attending a rowdy celebratory gathering, Sid lost the battle to his intense addictions in a devastating manner. He was only 21 years old. My Way became the final caustic testament of the punk era, recorded by someone who lived so fiercely and recklessly that survival into adulthood never seemed like a realistic option on the table. The sheer chaos surrounding these rock stars often seeped right into the very vinyl they pressed. Number 4, Who Are You? Keith Moon. The legendary larger-than-life drummer for The Who lived at 1,000 miles an hour, highly famous for destroying luxury hotel rooms and defying all human logic and biology. By the late 70s, however, the relentless years of extreme partying had taken a massive, undeniable toll on his body and mind. The band reunited to record the highly anticipated album Who Are You? And Keith's final contribution was burned not just into the heavy drum tracks, but into the chilling album cover art itself. The iconic photo features Moon sitting backward on a chair that has the words "Not to be taken away" prominently stenciled right across it. During the actual studio recordings, Moon's legendary ability to keep a solid rhythm was severely failing, and the production team had to perform extraordinary editing gymnastics just to capture his parts adequately. Just weeks after the album was released in 1978, after attending a film premiere party hosted by Paul McCartney, Keith tried to combat his overwhelming cravings with prescription medication, but took things tragically far. He passed away in the exact same London apartment where singing legend Cass Elliot had tragically met her end 4 years prior. The image of him sitting on that stenciled chair remains one of the most chilling visual premonitions in all of rock history. And album covers predicting disaster didn't stop there. Number 3, to read That Smell, Ronnie Van Zant and Lynyrd Skynyrd. Skynyrd was the undisputed royalty of Southern rock, but frontman Ronnie Van Zant was growing increasingly terrified of the wild behavior and dangerous habits that were actively consuming his bandmates. In a desperate attempt to address it, he penned That Smell for the album Street Survivors, a heavy, ominous song that spoke clearly about the unmistakable scent of the end approaching due to reckless excess. The chorus, specifically written as a harsh warning to guitarist Gary Rossington after a near-fatal car wreck, grimly proclaimed, "The smell of death surrounds you." In October 1977, mere days after the release of the album, which in its original, controversial pressing showed the band completely engulfed in massive, fiery flames on the cover, the group's chartered plane ran out of fuel and crashed violently into the dense Mississippi swamps. Ronnie and several others did not survive the impact. The record label urgently recalled the album to swap out the fiery cover art, but the incredibly specific final recordings were already deeply embedded in the public consciousness, twisting what was supposed to be a stern warning song into an incredibly heartbreaking epitaph. Those searching for higher spiritual elevation often found themselves trapped in very dark webs. Number 2, The Story of Life, Jimi Hendrix.
Story of life
Widely considered the absolute greatest guitar player to ever walk the earth, Hendrix aggressively pushed the boundaries of what sound could achieve. But by the late summer of 1970, his management situation was an absolute disaster. He was physically exhausted from years of back-to-back touring, and he was completely surrounded by industry hangers-on. In the final days before his sudden death in September, the atmosphere in London was rife with agitation, paranoia, and erratic behavior. On one of his very last nights, he sat in his hotel room and recorded not a sprawling guitar epic, but the spoken word recitation of a chilling poem he had written called The Story of Life. The deeply reflective lyrics are remarkably prescient, ending with the haunting lines. The story of life is quicker than the wink of an eye. The story of love is hello and goodbye, until we meet again. The very next day, Jimi suffered a tragic and fatal reaction to a powerful cocktail of sleeping pills and wine, enduring an excruciating end that to this day attracts fervent speculation, wild rumors, and theories of foul play. Those final spoken words remain a ghostly, poetic glimpse into the mind of a man who intuitively knew his time on this earth had fully expired. And finally, we turn to the king, who desperately hid his own collapse in plain sight. Number 1, Way Down, Elvis Presley. The most massive cultural icon in the world was, by 1977, heavily imprisoned by his own staggering creation. Refusing to enter professional commercial studios due to his rapidly declining health, massive weight gain, and deep paranoia of the outside world, RCA Records was forced to set up a state-of-the-art recording studio right inside the jungle room of Presley's own mansion, Graceland. Recording sessions that produced his final track, Way Down, were bizarre, deeply depressing, and shrouded in secrecy. Elvis's inner circle was fiercely maintaining a wall of silence regarding his true physical condition. He would only stumble into the makeshift studio room at 2 or 3 in the morning, battling severe exhaustion and immense denial over the physical toll of his heavy chemical regimen. Way Down featured a driving beat and the iconic swooping bass notes of his backup singer. But Elvis's own vocals carried an undeniable sense of dark, heavy fatigue. Despite optimistically trying to plan a brand new tour for that August, the megastar was never able to physically leave the house. On August 16th, 1977, the heavy velvet curtains closed on the king at Graceland, a sudden, devastating shock to the heart that the industry machine initially tried frantically to cover up. Way Down, his haunting final recording, had been released just prior to his passing and rapidly shot up the global charts. The title itself rang out as a tragic, heavy irony regarding his final, agonizing descent, perfectly immortalizing his last recorded moments, captured in the dark, completely isolated and forever cloistered away from the very public adoration that had built his towering empire. These immortal legends left us far too soon, deeply trapped between the crushing pressure of global fame, unresolved inner conflicts, and the very fragile reality of being human. They soundtracked our entire lives with their eternal booming voices, often paying the absolute highest price imaginable for the masterpieces we continue to enjoy today. Their final, haunting echoes prove that profound art and deep tragedy are sometimes only a single breath apart. If any of these stories moved you, or if there are other untold, eerie recordings you want us to investigate, drop a comment below. And don't forget to hit subscribe for more hidden stories that history desperately tried to keep buried in the dark.